Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menasce. On today's show, we're talking about how the housing industry is about to experience a wave of turnover. The federal moratorium on evictions that was put in place by the Center for Disease Control came to an end on August 1st. Some states and cities still have local regulations in place that might further protect tenants from eviction. I know of one California landlord who's been dealing with a tenant who has not paid rent in 14 months. And in the past few days, that tenant decided it's time for them to leave. They're leaving voluntarily. In another one of our apartments, we have a tenant who lost their job and has not paid in nearly a year. That economic vacancy has eliminated the profit from that particular building, and it's now operating essentially at cash flow neutral for the past year. Now, there's a possibility that the tenant might be able to get some rent relief which would cover some of the arrears over the past year. But so far, out of the $46 billion that the U.S. federal government has earmarked for rent relief, only 6.5% of that money's been distributed. After the CARES Act, the CDC implemented the latest federal eviction moratorium, but it was struck down by the courts. It was determined the CDC had overstepped its authority to govern housing policy. The Biden administration extended the moratorium 3 times since the beginning of the year, arguing they needed more time to distribute rent relief funds to landlords. Now, the judge ruled that if the moratorium was going to be extended past July 31st, it would need clear legislative guidance from Congress and the Senate. That legislative extension failed to materialize. But all of this begs the question, if the government is slow in getting rent relief into the hands of landlords, why are they making it the landlord's problem and eliminating any of the remedies that a landlord has at their disposal to get some income for their property? The eviction moratorium was perhaps justifiable early in the pandemic, when lockdowns threw millions out of work. But bad economic policies distort behavior, and they're difficult to end. So now the economic emergency is over. The economy grew over 6% last quarter, and there's labor shortages almost everywhere. It's time to get people back to work. So I'm going to go out on a limb and make a prediction. Now, it's not a giant leap of logic. It's merely connecting the dots. There's been a fair bit of mobility over the past year during the pandemic. People have moved a lot during the pandemic. In fact, nearly 7 million households moved to a different county in 2020. That's more than back in 2019. That's 5.7% of all of the households in America moved during the pandemic. They moved to a lower cost location where lifestyle choice was at the center of their decision, as the prospect of remote work became possible. Now, this time around, there's going to be a lot of movement as well. Nearly 16% of U.S. adults live in households that are behind on rent. Now, some tenants are going to try and skip out on their current landlord, hoping to get a fresh start in a new location. When those tenants skip out, they will need to find a new place, but some will be declined on their rental application. See, the professional landlords will see the current delinquency on their rental records and decline to rent to them. It's the amateur landlords who might be a little less proficient at tenant screening. They're likely the ones to experience those new tenants coming into their properties. But here's where things get interesting. We know there's been a shortage of building materials. We know there's been a shortage of construction labor. See, when people leave an apartment, there's a massive effort to get those units into rent-ready condition as quickly as possible. That means cleaning, painting, replacing damaged flooring and appliances. If the property is ready for renovation, then a larger scale improvement will be made to the property. An eviction doesn't help unless you can get the property rented again. Sure, landlords are hurting. Many have been 16 months without rent. But unless the property's rent-ready and attractive to new residents, it's going to stay empty. That's going to put a lot of immediate pressure on the construction industry, and I predict we're going to see a spike in demand for construction materials, not just lumber, but for all of the finishing materials and in particular for labor. We're going to see a spike in demand for interior doors, for windows and paint and drywall. We're going to see a run on bathroom vanities and kitchen cupboards. And we're going to experience a shortage of appliances. We're already experiencing shortages on electrical materials. Finding switches and circuit breakers is difficult in many locations. Supply chain disruptions have left many shelves empty at local big box stores, and the biggest impact has been in the increase in prices. The increase in lumber over the past year has been well documented, but I'm talking about everything else. I was in one of the big box stores yesterday to see which items were in short supply, and it's been several months since I was in a store. The activity was brisk. I frankly was experiencing sticker shock in one aisle after another. I couldn't believe the prices that were being charged for routine items. We're experiencing extended lead times on all kinds of products. Windows are backlogged by 4 to 5 months. Lock sets for doors are in short supply. So I'm going to go out on a limb today and predict that as the moratorium on evictions is lifted, we're going to see a massive game of musical chairs as tenants scramble to find new accommodations. And in the process, we're going to experience a wave of emergency repairs to rental properties, putting further pressure on the construction supply chain. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.